The sleek crystalline ship of the Galactic Alliance assessment team descended through Earth's atmosphere with all the grace of a ballet dancer, its iridescent hull reflecting the morning sun. Commander Zixtal stood at the observation deck, his 4 arms crossed in various poses of disapproval as his tertiary eyes scanned preliminary data streams. "Absolutely fascinating," he muttered, mandibles clicking in what his species considered a chuckle. "These humans haven't even developed basic genetic engineering for military applications. Are we absolutely certain this isn't some sort of clerical error?" Lieutenant VRGE, his chief xenobiologist, fluttered her sensory tendrils in agreement. "The data is quite clear, Commander. No natural armor plating, muscle density comparable to juvenile proxians and their bones." She paused for dramatic effect. "Made of calcium." Calcium. The same material some species use for temporary egg casings. The bridge crew shared what humans would have recognized as the alien equivalent of eye rolls and knowing smirks. They'd evaluated dozens of species for potential inclusion in the Alliance's war against the Void Dominion. None had ever been quite this primitive. "At least their atmospheric composition is tolerable," Zixtal grumbled, adjusting his ceremonial carapace. "Though these gravity levels are rather excessive. Make a note: potential joint pain issues for extended deployments." The ship touched down at the designated landing zone, a military base outside of Geneva that humans had apparently considered impressive. The commander's secondary hearts nearly seized when he realized they were still using fossil fuels for some of their ground vehicles. How charmingly archaic. As the diplomatic ramp extended, Zixtal's security chief, K.R. Thal, raised an alarming observation. "Sir, the human delegation approaching, they're wearing no environmental protection, not even basic radiation shields." Naturally, Zixtal sighed. "They probably haven't discovered cosmic ray sensitivity yet. Make sure our medical team is ready for when they start showing symptoms of exposure." The delegation that awaited them consisted of 5 humans, standing in what they presumably thought was an impressive formation. At their head stood a female specimen of average height, though all humans were essentially short by galactic standards. "Commander Zixtal," she called out as they approached, her voice carrying a note of barely contained amusement that the universal translators couldn't quite filter out. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force Liaison. Welcome to humanity's humble home." Zixtal extended his primary right arm in the traditional greeting of superior to inferior species. "Captain, we appreciate your world's interest in joining the Alliance, though I must admit, our preliminary scans raise some concerns." Oh Chen's eyebrow arched slightly. "Do tell." The commander activated his data display, projecting a holographic comparison between human physiology and various Alliance species. Where to begin? No redundant organs, minimal environmental adaptations, sensory capabilities barely above base evolutionary requirements. He paused, expecting the human to show some sign of shame or at least acknowledgement of their obvious shortcomings. Instead, Chen smiled. Not the polite, diplomatic smile he'd expected, but something else, something that made his threat assessment subroutines tingle uncomfortably. "Commander," she said, rocking slightly on her heels, "I've reviewed the Alliance's standard evaluation protocols. You'll be with us for the next 30 days, observing our military capabilities firsthand." "Correct." "That is accurate," Zixtal confirmed, wondering why she seemed almost excited by this fact. "Excellent." Chen's smile widened just a fraction. "Then I suggest you reserve judgment until you've seen what humanity's minimal environmental adaptations can actually do. We've arranged quite the demonstration tour." Something in her tone made Zixtal's 4th stomach clench. He'd evaluated primitive species before, but none had ever seemed quite so eager to prove him wrong. Still, he had a job to do. "Very well, Captain. Though I should warn you, the Alliance has very strict standards. We face enemies that would give your nightmares." Chen actually laughed at that. "Trust me, Commander, when it comes to nightmare," she gestured toward the waiting transport vehicles, where her human colleagues were already loading the Alliance's equipment with suspicious efficiency. "We wrote the book on them. Shall we begin?" As they walked toward the transports, Zixtal couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something obvious. Still, how surprising could these humans possibly be? They didn't even have proper claws. "This is a joke," Commander Zixtal declared, all 4 arms wrapped tightly around his torso despite his environmental suit's best efforts. "It must be a joke." Captain Chen, wearing what appeared to be criminally inadequate cold weather gear, just grinned. "What's wrong, Commander? I thought the Arcturnian Empire specialized in cold weather warfare." "Cold weather?" Yes, he chittered through chattering mandibles. "Not whatever this frozen hell is. Our suits are rated for deep space, yet they're struggling to compensate. How are your troops even functioning?" They stood at the edge of a vast Siberian training ground, watching human soldiers run drills in -40-degree weather. The aliens' sophisticated sensors were having trouble getting accurate readings through the swirling snow, and their transport vehicles had simply refused to start that morning, citing impossible operational conditions. The human vehicles, crude things running on compressed explosions and synthetic rubber wheels, seemed unfazed. "You get used to it," Lieutenant VRG heard one soldier say to another as they jogged past, their breath forming crystalline clouds. "It's not even that cold today." Her sensory tendrils curled in disbelief. The xenobiologist in her wanted to dissect one of these humans immediately to understand how they weren't becoming biological ice sculptures. The rest of her just wanted to get back to the heated command center. Captain Chen Kr Thal, the security chief, called out suddenly. "Our perimeter sensors are detecting a large predator approaching the training area. Should we deploy defensive measures?" Chen checked her datapad, then actually smiled. "Ah, right on schedule. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sergeant Viktor Petrov, our wilderness survival specialist." A massive human emerged from the tree line, moving with surprising grace for something his size. He wore less protection than the other soldiers, his massive arms exposed to the elements, and his face bore what appeared to be deliberately cultivated facial hair. "Visitors," he boomed in a voice that seemed to make the snow vibrate. "Welcome to Little Slice of Paradise. You are just in time for demonstration." Commander Zixtal's translator glitched slightly on the human's thick accent. "Demonstration of what, exactly?" As if in answer, an enormous brown bear burst from the trees behind Petrov, rearing up to its full height with a roar that sent the alien delegation scrambling for their personal shields. Of proper Russian hello, Petrov actually laughed and turned to face the bear. "Ah, Boris. Right on time, my friend." Boris VRG squeaked. "You named the apex predator." "Is good, Bear," Petrov shrugged, then charged directly at the massive creature. What followed would feature prominently in Commander Zixtal's nightmares for years to come. The human and the bear collided in what could only be described as a wrestling match, though that term seemed woefully inadequate. Petrov moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many, many times before, dodging claws and teeth, while applying what appeared to be formal combat holds to the creature. "This can't be standard military training," Kr Thal muttered, recording everything with wide-set eyes. "Oh, it's not," Chen admitted cheerfully. "Victor just likes to show off for visitors. Says it helps demonstrate human adaptability." By fighting an apex predator hand-to-hand, Zixtal's voice rose several octaves. "For entertainment." The bear had Petrov in what looked like a deadly embrace. The sergeant responded by tickling it behind the ears, causing the massive predator to release him with what sounded suspiciously like a pleased grunt. "Good boy," Boris Petrov laughed, rolling away from a half-hearted swipe. "But remember what we discussed about proper force control? Yes, you are getting sloppy." The alien delegation watched in stunned silence as the fight continued for several more minutes, eventually ending with the bear ambling away looking somewhat embarrassed while Petrov dusted snow from his shoulders. That was a trained demonstration. Surely, VRG finally managed. The animal was conditioned for this performance. "Nyet," Petrov grinned, walking over to join them. "Boris is wild bear. We just have understanding. He helps me train new soldiers in survival techniques. I make sure tourists don't bother his favorite fishing spots." His beneficial relationship. Beneficial relationship, Commander Zixtal seemed to be having trouble processing the words. With an untamed apex predator. Is simple psychology, Petrov shrugged. Bears are like most creatures, they respect strength, understand boundaries when properly explained. Plus, wrestling helps keep him in shape during winter months. Is important for wild animals to maintain proper exercise regime. The commander turned to Captain Chen, all four arms raised in exasperation. "Your soldiers regularly engage in recreational combat with megafauna?" Only the Russians, she assured him, then paused. Well, and the Australians, but they're a special case. Should I tell them about the cassowary incident? No, all three alien officers shouted simultaneously. Perhaps Zixtal said carefully, watching Petrov begin to demonstrate simple wrist locks to a group of fascinated junior officers. We should move on to observing your more conventional training protocols. Chen's smile took on that dangerous quality again. Of course, Commander. The halo jumping demonstration is scheduled for this afternoon. I assume your environmental suits are rated for high-altitude deployment. The aliens shared a collective look of dread. Somehow, they doubted anything in their combat experience had prepared them for whatever humans considered a conventional training protocol. In the distance, Boris the bear watched the proceedings with what looked suspiciously like ursine amusement, already looking forward to next week's wrestling practice. Simulation terminated. Fatal error flashed across the holoscreen for the 7th time that morning. Lieutenant VRG, these sensory tendrils were practically tied in knots as she tried to understand what was going wrong. I don't understand, she muttered, reviewing the data. The simulation is perfect. It accurately models every known combat scenario in the galaxy. Yet somehow. Let me guess, Captain Chen leaned over her shoulder, grinning. Your computer keeps insisting that what our soldiers just did was impossible. They were surrounded by elite Kronax death squads. The probability of survival was 0.000000001%. And then your Lieutenant O'Connor, she gestured helplessly at the replay. The recording showed O'Connor's avatar, cornered by heavily armed aliens, apparently deciding that the logical response was to use one enemy as a springboard, backflip over another's head while stealing their weapon. Then ricochet off 3 different walls while delivering precise shots to each opponent's weak point. The physics engine keeps crashing because it insists those movements violate the laws of motion, Commander Zixtal noted, all 4 arms crossed in frustration. Ah, Chen nodded sagely. You haven't seen many parkour videos, have you? Parkour? Here, let me show you. Chen pulled up what she called YouTube on her primitive data device. The aliens watched in horror as humans, regular civilians, not even military personnel, threw themselves off buildings, flipped through impossible spaces, and generally treated gravity as more of a suggestion than a law. These are entertainment videos, Dr. Petrov asked weakly. They do this for fun. Oh yeah, it's huge on social media. O'Connor was actually a parkour instructor before joining the military. Says it gives him an edge in zero-G training. As if on cue, alarms began blaring from the zero-gravity combat course. The alien delegation rushed to the observation deck, expecting some horrible accident. Instead, they found O'Connor spinning through the null-gravity chamber like some demented combination of dancer and projectile weapon. Is he humming? Kr Thal asked incredulously. Dancing Queen by ABBA, Chen confirmed. He says it helps him time his movements. They watched as O'Connor used the chamber's obstacles like launching pads, building momentum in ways that made the physics professors back on Arcturus Prime weep. The training drones didn't stand a chance. They were programmed to defend against normal attack vectors, not whatever this was. I'm called the range officer. New course record 2 minutes, 17 seconds. O'Connor floated to the chamber's exit, looking disappointed. Ah, thought I could get under 2 minutes. Guess I'll have to try that triple cork thing after all. The what thing? Commander Zixtal asked, dreading the answer. Oh, it's this move I saw in a Red Bull competition. You basically... No, Dr. Petrov interrupted. No more human moves, my medical sensors cannot take it. They retreated to the simulation room, where VRRG was still trying to modify the combat programs to account for human capabilities. The current scenario showed a squad trapped in a collapsing space station with no escape pods. This one is impossible, Kr Thal declared confidently. Even humans can't survive hard vacuum. The simulation started. They watched as the human squad used explosive decompression to propel themselves toward a passing debris field, surfed on pieces of wreckage through the debris, hijacked a passing drone repair ship by hitting it with what appeared to be a thrown boot, made it back to their base in time for something called Taco Tuesday. Simulation terminated. Logical paradox flashed across the screen. But VRG, these tendrils were practically vibrating. They didn't even have proper vacuum suits. Just those emergency pressure suits that are only rated for 30 seconds of exposure. Yet Chen nodded. That's why they had to hurry. The boot car, Thal exclaimed. The boot shouldn't have even reached the repair ship in that gravity field. Oh, that was Sally's idea. She played softball in college. The aliens stared at her blankly. It's a sport where you throw balls really fast, Chen explained. Though technically Sally was ejected from the league for throwing too fast and scaring the umpires. Your species commander Zextal said slowly, invented sports specifically to practice throwing objects at high velocity, among other things. Wait until you see what basketball players can do in 0G, though we had to ban dunking after the incident with the station's hull integrity. The simulation computer chose that moment to emit a high-pitched whine and shut down completely, a single message flashing on its screen. Human behavior exceeds computational parameters. Neural network requests therapy. Don't worry, Chen patted the smoking console. That happens a lot. Want to see the obstacle course next? We've added lava pits since your last visit. The alien delegation's unified groan was answer enough. No, no, play it again, Commander Zextal insisted, mandibles twitching erratically. There must be some error in the footage. The holo recording replayed a team of marine combat divers calmly setting demolition charges 50 meters underwater, in the dark, while fighting current, with sharks circling overhead. Those are your standard rebreathers, Lieutenant VRG, asked Captain Chen, her sensory tendrils practically tied in knots. Oh no, Chen replied cheerfully. The regular ones were too bulky for this operation. They're using emergency mini-units, only good for about 30 minutes of air. The charges they're setting, KR Thal noted, they're powerful enough to sink a carrier. Yes, Chen checked her watch. Don't worry though, this is just practice. They're using dummy charges. The live fire exercise isn't until next week. The aliens shared a collective shudder. They'd spent the morning watching Army Rangers practice halo jumps, high-altitude, low-opening parachute deployments from the edge of space. The humans had called it pretty basic stuff and seemed disappointed when the alien observers declined to participate. But why, VRG had asked one of the Rangers as he checked his gear. Why jump from such a height when landing craft exist? Because it's there, he'd replied with a grin, then stepped out of the perfectly good aircraft. Now they stood on the shores of Alaska, watching Navy SEALs perform what they called ice water conditioning, which apparently meant staying submerged in near-freezing water for ungodly amounts of time while singing something called sea shanties. Their core temperatures, the medical officer, Dr. Petrov, muttered as he studied his scanner. They should be dead, or at least unconscious, but their bodies are adapting. Oh yeah, Chen nodded. The cold response gets better with practice. These guys can stay in for about an hour now before hypothermia becomes an issue. Dr. Petrov's eye stalks quivered. You train to resist hypothermia, among other things. Look, the next group is starting their warm-up exercises. The aliens watched in horror as the SEAL candidates began a series of brutal physical activities: running, swimming, carrying heavy logs, more running, something called flutter kicks that looked like slow torture. This is just the warm-up, Commander Zextal asked weakly. Well, yeah, you don't want to pull a muscle during the real training. That'd be embarrassing. Before the commander could process this fresh insanity, a new group of soldiers jogged past, each carrying what appeared to be their own body weight in gear. Ah, perfect timing, Chen beamed. This is the fun run group. Dr. Petrov's translator glitched. Fun? Run? These words do not compute together. Sure, 20-mile jog in full combat gear. Builds endurance, team spirit. These folks do it every Friday. They call themselves the Masochist Morning Club. The medical officer's primary heart skipped a beat. They named themselves after the pursuit of pain. It's just a joke, Chen assured him. Mostly. Captain Commander Zextal interrupted, his voice strained. These activities, they're some form of punishment, yes? For military infractions. What? No, this is all voluntary. Well, mandatory for certain special forces qualifications, but everyone here chose to be here. Most of them specifically requested these programs. Dr. Petrov swayed slightly. Voluntary torture. It's not torture, Chen sighed. It's just working out. You know, controlled mechanical stress to induce micro tears in the muscle fiber, which then heals stronger than before. Basic biological adaptation. The medical officer's eyes rolled back in his head as he collapsed into Kr Thal's arms. Was it something I said? Chen asked innocently. You, Commander Zix Tal, struggled to form words. Your species intentionally damages itself to become stronger. Well, sure. How else would you build muscle? Oh, you should see the CrossFit competitions, those are really intense. No, all conscious aliens shouted simultaneously. Your call, Chen shrugged. Though you might want to wake up the doctor. The Marines are about to demonstrate their new underwater hand-to-hand combat techniques. Apparently they've figured out how to execute a perfect arm bar while fighting a giant Pacific octopus. An octopus? Yeah, they've got this training program where, hey, where are you going? Commander, the demonstration's about to start. Don't you want to see how they deal with the ink clouds? But the alien delegation was already retreating, carrying their unconscious medical officer while muttering what sounded like prayers in various languages. Chen watched them go with a slight smile. She pulled out her comm unit control. This is Chen. Maybe we should postpone the demonstration of Marine Corps scout snipers doing their Arctic survival training? You know, the one where they stay completely motionless in the snow for 3 days straight. Copy that, Captain Control replied. Should we cancel tomorrow's scheduled overview of Army Special Forces underwater knife fighting techniques? No, keep that one. But maybe we don't mention it's done in shark-infested waters. Don't want to overwhelm our guests too quickly. In the distance, the sound of the SEAL candidates' sea shanties mixed with the happy shouts of the Fun Run group and the distinctive splash of Marines practicing their octopus wrestling techniques. Just another Thursday in Special Forces training. The Void Dominion scouts picked the worst possible moment to attack or the best, depending on your perspective. Commander Zix Tal was in the middle of explaining why humanity's primitive projectile weapons would be useless in modern combat when the first enemy ships breached atmosphere. Energy shields up, he barked, deploying his personal defense screen. Nothing happened. What's wrong with the shield generators? Captain Chen, already moving toward the armory with practiced ease, called back over her shoulder. Earth's magnetic field plays hell with your shield technology. Didn't you read the briefing? The what? But she was already gone, leaving the alien delegation staring helplessly as 3 Void Dominion dropships descended through the clouds. This is unfortunate, Kr Thal observed dryly. Without shields, our energy weapons will overheat in seconds. We should retreat too. The rest of his sentence was drowned out by the distinctive sound of human ballistic weapons opening fire. The aliens watched in shock as simple chemical-propelled metal projectiles tore through the Void Scouts' now useless energy shields. Primitive but effective Sergeant Petrov laughed, appearing from nowhere with an absolutely massive rifle. Like bear wrestling, sometimes old way is best way. The Void troops, clearly expecting an easy victory against an unshielded enemy, found themselves in a nightmare. Their advanced armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, might as well have been tissue paper against the humans' bullets. And these humans, they moved wrong. They're not following any known combat doctrine, Lieutenant VRG whispered, recording everything. Their movements are completely unpredictable. Indeed, the human soldiers seem to be coordinating through some bizarre combination of hand signals, body language, and what looked disturbingly like interpretive dance. A Marine would throw up 3 fingers, spin in place, and do a backflip, and somehow his entire squad would know exactly where to move and what to target. That's standard NATO tactical sign language, Chen explained, reappearing with fresh magazines. Well, mostly standard. We had to improvise a bit. A Void warrior, twice the size of a human, cornered a young soldier who'd run out of ammunition. The aliens expected a surrender or retreat. Instead, the soldier grinned, dropped his empty weapon, and took what Chen later explained was a Krav Maga stance. What followed was perhaps the first documented case of an elite Void warrior being defeated by what appeared to be a combination of Israeli martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and what one soldier enthusiastically described as good old-fashioned bar fighting. Did he just? Commander Zix Tal's mandibles went slack. Did he just throw sand in that warrior's optical sensors? If it's stupid but it works, Chen shrugged, it's not stupid. The battle shifted again as the humans began using the environment itself as a weapon. Sergeant Petrov and his squad had somehow managed to trigger a controlled avalanche, burying an entire enemy unit in snow. Another group was using the local geology to create echo chambers, confusing the void's sonic tracking systems. And then there was the music. "Is that Wagner?" Dr. P. Tell asked weakly. "Pride of the Valkyries," Chen confirmed. "Delta Force tradition. They say it's demoralizing to get beaten by someone blasting classical music." A human soldier slid past on what appeared to be a commandeered cafeteria tray, using it as a makeshift sled while lobbing grenades with terrifying accuracy. Another was dual-wielding rifles while standing on someone else's shoulders, creating an impromptu mobile gun platform. "This defies all known tactical protocols," K.R. Thal protested. "That's kind of the point," Chen said, picking off a Void scout with casual precision. "The enemy can't predict what you're going to do if even you don't know what you're going to do." The coup de grace came when the Void commander, frustrated by his force's inability to counter such chaos, deployed their supposedly unstoppable heavy assault units. The humans responded by having Sergeant Petrov literally call in his bear. Boris emerged from the tree line like a furry avalanche, accompanied by what appeared to be his entire extended family. The sight of human soldiers riding bears into battle while singing something called the Bear Necessities proved too much for the Void warriors' morale. The retreat was called within minutes. As the dust settled and medical teams began treating the surprisingly few human casualties, Commander Zixtal found himself re-evaluating every assumption he'd made about humanity's military potential. "Your tactics," he finally managed. "There," insane Chen offered helpfully. "I was going to say unconventional, but yes, that too." He watched as a soldier demonstrated to his squadmates how he'd used a broken antenna as an improvised javelin. "How do you even train for this kind of combat?" "That's the neat part," Chen grinned. "We don't. We just create an environment where adaptability and creative problem solving are valued over rigid doctrine. The rest sort of happens naturally." "Naturally," Zixtal repeated weakly. "Like bear cavalry." "Exactly. Though that was mostly Viktor showing off again. Usually we stick to more conventional vehicles." She paused. "Well, except for the combat parkour team. They prefer to travel by backflip." In the distance, Boris the Bear was receiving a field promotion to honorary sergeant, while his new human comrades taught his cubs the basics of ambush tactics. Commander Zixtal decided some things were better left unquestioned. Commander Zixtal sat in his temporary office at the Geneva base, staring at the blank report template on his holoscreen. After 3 attempts, he deleted everything and started fresh. How could he possibly explain what he'd witnessed in a way that wouldn't get him immediately committed to a psychiatric evaluation facility? A knock at the door interrupted his contemplation. Captain Chen entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs of what humans called coffee, a stimulant brew that probably violated several Galactic Alliance substance control regulations. "Thought you could use this," she said, setting one mug down. "Having trouble with the report." You could say that he picked up the mug with his lower right arm, his other limbs still typing and deleting various attempts at diplomatic phrasing. "How do I explain that your species' greatest military asset is your complete lack of natural military assets?" Chen settled into a chair, sipping her coffee. "Having an epiphany, are we?" "We were so wrong," Zixtal admitted. "We looked at your species and saw nothing but disadvantages. No natural weapons, no armor, relatively weak muscles, limited sensory capacity." He gestured at his own 4 arms and reinforced exoskeleton. "We thought you were defective. And now I understand. You're not powerful despite these limitations. You're powerful because of them." He began pacing, all 4 arms gesticulating as he worked it out. "Because you had no natural weapons, you learned to turn anything into a weapon. I watched one of your Marines take down a Void warrior with nothing but a pencil and what he called angry creativity." "John Wick would be proud," Chen murmured into her coffee. "Because you had no natural armor." Zixtal continued, building steam. "You learned to avoid getting hit entirely. Your entire species developed dozens of combat styles based on using an opponent's strength against them. That Void commander still doesn't understand how he was thrown by someone 1/3 his size. Leverage is fun that way. And your muscles. We thought they were pathetically weak, but they're incredibly efficient. You can't match our strength. So you learn to use tools and mechanical advantage. One of your soldiers disabled a void heavy assault unit with nothing but a length of rope and something called a physics degree. Chen nodded. Yeah, Lieutenant Rodriguez is pretty proud of that one. He's already submitted a paper to several engineering journals. Even your limited senses led you to develop technology to extend them far beyond their natural range. While our warriors were relying on their superior natural abilities, your soldiers were using thermal imaging, satellite data, and, he checked his notes, something called Dave's really good intuition about when things are about to go sideways. To be fair, Dave is unusually talented in that regard. Zixtal finally sat down, all four arms dropping in resignation. How do I explain to the Alliance that humanity's greatest weapon is your complete lack of specialized weapons? That you're deadly precisely because you never evolved to be deadly in any particular way? You could just show them the video of Victor and Boris doing their synchronized bear cavalry routine, Chen suggested. That usually gets the point across. I considered that, but I'm worried it might cause a panic. He picked up his coffee again. Did you know there's already a movement in the Alliance military to ban what they're calling human-style training? Apparently some of our younger officers tried to replicate your fun runs and had to be physically restrained. See? We're already influencing galactic military doctrine. Zixtal began typing again, this time with purpose. I'm recommending immediate admission of Earth's military forces into the Alliance, with one crucial condition. Oh. You are never, under any circumstances, to be allowed to get bored, he shuddered slightly. The thought of humans with nothing to do but think up new training methods keeps all four of my hearts awake at night. That's fair, Chen admitted. Though you should probably add a clause about prohibiting joint training exercises with Australian Special Forces. We're still cleaning up from the last time they visited. Already noted, Zixtal assured her, remembering the cassowary incident with a full-body shiver. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish this report before your Marines convince my security team to try something called extreme underwater basket weaving. Too late, Chen grinned, checking her phone. But don't worry, they're wearing safety helmets. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of enthusiastic splashing mixed with alien screams of confusion and what might have been Wagner. Commander Zixtal decided some details were better left out of official reports.